Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual breakfast sessions. I'm Larry Sashin, and today we have a great group put together to talk about restaurant failure and the why it happens. But before we do that, let's introduce the people who are paying our bills today. Ed Flanagan in the Era Group. Listen, I've been saying this over and over and over again. If you're tired of paying that money to your employee taxes, call Ed Flanagan and the Era Group and their Cafeteria 125 plan that is sponsored by the IRS will help you claw back some of that money, help you extend some benefits to your people, and I think everybody will be happy. So call Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. Back to our show. There's been a big problem on restaurant failure. And just the other day, we saw that Kraft closed after 20 some odd years of serving people. Now, it seems like they were doing well, but really, it's like the title here says, Gone Before the Last Call, the economics of failure. There had to be things going on
Can you
there
call
that we
something
didn't
a
know.
failure after 25 years? I don't know if that's fair.
Well, it's not, but it's being reproduced all over the city, and I imagine all over the country. So, before we start talking about this, why don't we introduce our panel? Michael, why don't you start?
Thanks, Larry. Happy to be here this morning. My name is Michael Balasamo, and I spent the last 25 years running restaurant operations, mostly in Manhattan, but also with multi-unit restaurant groups in the DC area, Miami, a little bit on Long Island. And I currently run and operate the Sage Advisory Group, which was founded on the premise and the focus of helping restaurant owners understand their restaurant business a bit better than they do today, more visibility into how they're performing, what's working, what's not, and we help close the gaps so that they could be more profitable and stay in business longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Gieto, say hi.
Hello, I'm Gieto Nicaj, owner of a few different properties, Patsey's in Bronxville, Dumbo Oyster Bar, one if by land, two if by sea in the West Village, and a couple of other different operations. And I'm happy to be on board.
All right, thank you. Say hi, Fred.
Morning, Fred Clashman, editor and publisher at Total Food Service.
Okay, I'm back to the show. Last call. Closed by last call. The economics of restaurant failure. Is this the tip of the iceberg that we see coming on here? Is this the collapse of the restaurant industry as we know it that we've been reading about and fearing? Michael, what are you seeing?
I don't think so, Larry. I really don't. I think the restaurant industry is always going to be difficult. We all know it's tight margins, and we all know that labor and rent is not making anybody's life any easier these days. But I see groups like Steven Starr and even our guest, Gieto here, he's expanding and growing. So I don't think the industry at all is in a bad shape. I do think, however, owners and operators just need to be more mindful about their business operating model. I think at the end of the day, you either have a good operating model or you don't. And I think that's got to be the focus now more than ever.
Okay. Gieto,
Yes.
you're opening restaurants left and right. What's going on that you see the opportunity in these restaurant failures, and how have you kept your head above water during these times?
As it was just mentioned, the restaurant industry is I'm not going to say it, but it is a struggle, and it's always going to struggle in some ways. I mean, it's just, you have to take in the numbers, and numbers don't lie. First of all, yes, everything's gotten very, very expensive. And no matter how expensive things get, you can only increase your pricing so much in order to stay ahead of the curve. So that's one very big problem. And restaurant failure percentages are, I believe, tough to gauge as far as percentages, because you have a lot of restaurants where they're first-time restaurateurs. And I'm not saying that we're better than everybody else, but sometimes people get into the restaurant business for a lot of different reasons. They look at your business and say, wow, they're doing great. I should do this and I should do that. So you get a lot of that happens. And I think we see that often, whether it's about, they think it's cool or they think it's, fun. And reality is it's a very tough business. And you're going to get a lot of that. But for the ones who've been in it for a long time, you also have to look at the dynamics of your location, your business model, and it was said perfectly. After 20-something years, they decided to close. Once your lease is up or your location is up, but sometimes that model is just not the same anymore. You have to, decide, okay, what am I going to do with it? Do I close it, become something else? Do I decide to move on? Or there's a better opportunity somewhere else because the business that you have might be perfect in another location. Maybe there's a landlord that's more aggressive that wants that business in their facility and they're willing to give you a better deal. So you have to kind of take there isn't a cut and dry answer. This is what it is. And you just have to kind of keep your finger on the pulse and really monitor. I have some businesses. Why would I open? I'm, again, looking at the margins. If I have two businesses pretty close in proximity, like two businesses within 100 feet of each other, that might work well because then I can utilize both properties with, less employees and work together. The other problem is if it was just even 5 blocks away, for example, that might not be as good an opportunity. So unfortunately, there's no clean answer. There's not 100 variables, it could be 1,000 variables. You just have to hopefully get it right. That's my feeling.
So Gieto, you're building during this downturn. How are you staying ahead of the wave?
Again, we've I think being very mindful of purchases, doing a lot more shopping than we did in the past. In the past, when you're really busy and you're cranking, so to speak, you go with the usual, you buy and you crank it out and you're good. When it gets really tight, then you have to start really looking at, okay, shop around. Let me look at what we're buying, because pennies do equal dollars and you just have to be very careful. We hold more meetings about not cutting, but just make sure we're saving because, there's only so much you can cut where you may cut too deep. And I think we've done a much better job at, cost control and things like that. And I'm not saying we didn't do it in the past, but now we're watching our pennies more than ever. And sometimes if you could save across a few businesses $100,000, that's money to the bottom line. For you to make that 100, you have to look at how much more business you have to do to make that 100. So, it's unfortunate to say, but yes, we get comfortable and we're running around, we're doing well. But when things start to tighten up, you have to tighten up. And that's what we've done, to look for that perfect line of how much can you cut without, cutting out product, and we'll never cut out quality. That's the one thing we don't give on.
Okay, Fred.
Well, there's a lot of issues. We've listened the last 2 years about difficulty with the cost of labor. We've listened to the problem with food costs. My question to the panel is, what's real and what isn't real? In other words, what are the actual barriers right now? Is it third-party delivery? Is it defining who you are? What are we really seeing? What is it that's creating the difference between winning and losing?
I really
Mike?
think that, I think Gieto really hit it on the head when he talked about looking at the numbers. The numbers definitely don't lie. And I don't think it's anything external that's really determining success or failure because everybody is dealing with the same, right? Everyone's dealing with third-party delivery. People are drinking less. The generation of millennials is a different generation than when I was going out to dinner. I think all the factors of every restaurant are the same, but what I find with my clients and what I'm seeing more of is what's happening behind the scenes. Are other restaurateurs like Gieto managing the dollars, managing the purchases? Are you really watching everything you're doing with such intention that you're making a difference each day, every week, every month? Because before you know it, we all know you get busy, you put your head down and 6 months go by And if you're not seeing where your labor's trending, if you're not watching your purchases, if you're not watching your vendors, are you getting in what you're buying? Are you really getting in 10 pounds of beef? Or are you getting in 8.5? Is your chef prepping 8.5 ounces, or is he prepping 9? So the money and the profit is being made and lost in those processes. And it doesn't matter to me whether you're a 50-seat cafe or a 200-seat restaurant. The only thing you're going to do is end up multiplying the good decisions or multiplying the bad ones. And if you don't have that process in place, we all know you're going to bleed and it's not going to be pretty. And I can't stress enough how important those processes are right now across every decision. It's an investment that restaurant owners have to make today in order to be here tomorrow.
So does it start with the tech stack? Does it start with a look at what you're using for tools how do you, so we agree on that. What do I do next?
I think you need to look at everything you do throughout the day, Fred. I think you need to look at how is your receiving process? Have you sat with your chef and your prep team to talk about prep? Are you looking at what you have in the walk-in at the end of the week? Are you tracking your purchases against your revenue in January as you are in June and September? So it's really literally looking at every decision you make. And yeah, the tech stack's important, but I think there's a misnomer out there that tech runs your business. It doesn't. It gives you data in order to run your business. If you don't know what you're looking at, it doesn't matter what tech stack you have.
Okay. We all suffer from inertia one way or another. You ask a restaurateur who's been in business for 20 years, and he says, well, this is the way we did it. Well, things have changed since I guess COVID is the big catalyst that started the ball rolling. How do you get that person who's been doing it the way dad did it or grandpa did it to get moving? Gieto, how often do you go over your procedures to make them make changes where you need to do it?
Well, it's funny when we talk about how dad did it, and I always say that because my son's, very involved, and I always tell him, listen, I want you to use your thinking. Don't just use dad's thinking. I use that all the time. Just, look around, come up with some, fresh ideas. My ideas aren't always the best ideas, I tell them. I just throw it out there and let's just all talk about it. You can be the boss at the end of the day. It doesn't mean you're always right. And I said, listen, let's look at this. Let's look at that. We talk about procedures. We talk about, handling. We just talk about receiving. Now, this is and I'm going to backtrack for just a second on what was just said. Something that you would think you would never have to look at. We had a very, interesting experiment, right after COVID. We're receiving tons, we do tons of coffee in a couple of locations. And I decided to open up a case of coffee one day. And we have, I think, 30 bags or whatever it was, 32, 34, whatever bags of coffee in these big case. I started to weigh each bag individually. And lo and behold, that every 8-ounce bag was only 6.5 ounces.
No.
Now,
Whoa.
you would think this professionally sealed bag, and all of a sudden I started to say, wait, that's impossible. But you know what happens when they service your machines also, and you calibrate it, it's calibrated to 6.5, not 8. So we've been buying these 8-ounce bags of coffee, but we're only getting 6.5 ounces times, we probably do about, I don't know how many thousands of cups in the building. We service the entire building, which is 4 city blocks. So if you can fathom how much coffee we've gone through and how short we have been for so long, and of course we switch companies, and of course it's just an error. It's had to be a mistake. That company.
You notice that the error always goes to the light, not to the heavy. They didn't send you 8.5 ounces.
Right.
I asked them, did you ever make a mistake in my favor? And we couldn't find one. So that's where my problem lies. And honestly, again, another thing that was just mentioned is on receiving. With my own eyes, he walked by, he dropped off 6 cases of coffee. The young lady's signing for 6 cases. And I said, well, it says 8 cases. How did you just walk by with 6? No, I didn't. Of course. I walk him back to the storeroom. He puts 6 cases on, and the 6 cases go right up to the handle. If you had 8, they'd be above the handle, so they're impossible carrying this hand truck unless they're falling over. So I said, you put 8 cases on here, because our storeroom has plenty of it, and he put 6 and it stopped, and the rest would be up to here. And all of a sudden, we realized that maybe there was a mistake. Again, not in my favor, but this is a perfect example of how, I'm not saying that everybody's going to steal, but you can't have 100% trust either. And receiving, being diligent, weighing, again, you just said it, weighing. Once in a while, the fish guy, hey, we have a scale right here. If you don't have a scale, you're making a mistake. Weigh it. And guess what? Somehow that 10-pound salmon is actually only 8.
That's right.
So he's giving you the best price because it's not the best price.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Larry, I just negotiated a linen vendor for one of my clients, and we dropped the price of a napkin. You figure, oh, what's a napkin going to cost you? We dropped it from 16 cents to 9 cents. It's a 150-seat restaurant, open 6.5 days a week, doing $8 million a year. You do the math on those 6 cents, 9 cents on a napkin. And he wasn't going to come to the client. Yeah. He wasn't going to go to the client and say, well, let me lower your price. Yeah.
It's, we did a whole show on that, actually. Death by 1,000 costs, how restaurants bleed out. I mean, it is all the time.
Right? Thank you.
Have them get me a cup of coffee, Gieto, please. All right. So it's the same thing. So what can a restaurateur, what does Mr. Inertia or Mrs. Inertia have to do to get their butt in gear? What's the first step, Michael?
I think they need to be willing to see things objectively, whether it's having a conversation with their management team, their chef, their partner, their accountant, someone like me, someone like Gieto that's been in the business. At the end of the day, someone really needs to look at their business and step back and realize what we're talking about today. Things are not and never have been easy in the industry. My dad had a restaurant for 25 years back in the 70s and 80s, and it wasn't easy then, and it's not easy now. But to just keep riding that inertial wave, you're going to hit hard on the sand at some point. Hopefully not. I mean, I have a lot of respect for restaurant operators and owners and what they have to deal with. But if the warning signs now aren't making people more aware to sit back and take a real close look at everything we're talking about today, but you have to be willing to look. Start with one process. Gieto brought up the receiving or your vendor or your delivery. Just find one aspect, and throughout the course of the week or the course of a couple of weeks, sit with your bookkeeper, sit with your general manager, go talk to your chef, ask those hard questions. And if these guys and people aren't doing those things, implement them, right? We're not here to punish people. We're not here to get them in trouble, but they need to be watching the business as much as anybody.
Yeah. Unfortunately, people learn after they bang their head more than once. It's like, Gieto, you were buying 6.5-ounce bags of coffee and paying for 8. It finally took that spot check. So, Gieto, if you were to pick 3 things that a restaurateur should go and spot check today, what would those 3 things be?
Well, I don't think 3 things is enough, but
well, they have to start someplace.
I know that. I really, Michael put it perfectly. I think, if you don't stop and say, doesn't matter what order, you have to start somewhere. And, I walk through the kitchen, I look in the garbage, and everyone says, "Do you lose anything?" Nope. I just want to see what we're throwing out. I want to see waste. I think, portion control is super important. And if you have a chef who's good at it, you're in good shape. If you have a chef who's bad at it, trust me, you're gonna feel it. I think the purchasing and receiving is super important, because that's, again, your coffee, your salmon, meat, all these things coming in. How do you know you're buying prime? How do you know if you're not checking it? So there's a lot of that goes on. And I think, to me, that's first and foremost. And same thing with payroll and scheduling. If you're not looking at it, because everybody gets comfortable, it's very rare that when they say, hey, we're going to eliminate payroll by hiring this one part-time person, right? How many days? 3 days. I've never seen that 3-day person work 3 days. They always wind up working 5. Now I just add another body onto the payroll. So, product, then people, those are the two biggest things that you can control. There are a lot of other variables. Yes, you can monitor them, but your purchases and your schedule are the two things you're in charge of. And if you don't control that, then everything else is gone, because those will put you out of business quicker than anything else. So those are my two. I don't need to go to 3. Those two alone are the biggest factors.
Okay. Fred.
So I go back to my other question, which is what's that first step? In other words, theoretically, I have an accountant. I might have a bookkeeper. I have a general manager. So what can I do differently? How can I change how we're doing things? Do I bring in Cisco US Foods, Chef's Warehouse, whoever my vendor is? What's the plan?
I think it really depends on what the data that is being given to you and what you're doing with that data, right? Everything we're talking about is sort of theory and philosophy about food and scheduling and purchasing, which are very valid, but dig deeper, right? Run yourself a product mix, look at your schedule, look at the schedule that your chef is writing. And if I'm going to do 100,000 this week in sales and my chef's schedule is going to be 16% labor cost, well, is that acceptable? Is 14% the target? And how do we get from 16 to 14% on a regular basis? Does the chef know how to cost out a schedule? I think you need to assess the data and what your team is doing with that data. Writing a schedule is easy, but if you're not looking at it saying my payroll was 20,000 last week when I did 150,000, I'm scheduled or projecting rather for the July week to only do 90,000. Well, you certainly can't run with the same $20,000 payroll, but is that being communicated? Is someone telling the chef and the GM and the other managers, hey, we got to cut payroll by 5, 6, 8, 10%, whatever this week? It's a holiday weekend. We're closed on the 4th. That's where I really feel, Fred, the action has to happen. But again, if you don't have that philosophy or that mindset, you're just going to keep spinning with inertia, as Larry likes to say. But someone needs to stop the merry-go-round, whether it's the accountant or someone like me or someone in the business, or someone's got to raise their hand and say, hey, are we making the right adjustments?
Right. I find that many of the accountants and many of the advisors are there when you need them, when you call them. Very few of them will then, call you and say, I noticed this line item. What can I do? So I am a true believer in reaching out to somebody like Sage or a group like that, because they have no skin in the game. They have no allegiances except to the data. The data doesn't lie. Data doesn't lie. So listen, we've come to that time of the show where time is our enemy. And we're going to go around the room in a second just to give that last tidbit of information. But before we do that, once again, and my God, if you weren't listening to this show, then the next thing I say won't mean anything to you. Listen, if you're worried about the expenses, the things that are flying out the window, those pennies that fly out every single day because you don't check invoices, you don't check what's coming into your restaurant, you don't check what you're paying your employees or your utilities. If you don't have time to do that, call Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. That's all they do. They check your invoices. They check your contracts. They check to make sure you're getting the right deals. So call Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. Okay. Last tidbits of information. Michael, why don't you start?
Just want to say thanks to Larry and Fred for being on the show today. Gieto, congrats again on all that's happening with you. I can't wait to make it up to Bronxville or someplace to dine. I'd love to connect with you when we can. And, Larry, I really am committed to helping people. It's not about me. It's not about me getting paid. I just want restaurant owners to turn the corner. Let's turn this path that we're on. I hope that they can, have those moments of clarity. And if they don't, they can call me or someone like me to help them out. But I'm in the business of helping people out to stay in business. That's my job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Gieto.
Well, thank you again for having me on the show. Pleasure meeting you, Michael. And yes, we will definitely have to get together one day. Let me know when you're in Bronxville or Brooklyn or wherever, maybe in the West Village. But again, I think this is helpful. It's good insight, and it's as other people watch, I'm sure they have their own ideas, input. You know, uh, I just love what I do. Yes, it's a struggle, but there are plenty of businesses that have been around forever and struggle. So, you have your highs and lows. Maybe now's a low, and then turn the corner. It's also people change, different habits. It's you just got to kind of have fun with it. Keep your finger on the pulse and see what's going to happen next. But again, you really have to, watch your dollars and cents if you want to stay in this business a long time.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Fred.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think it comes down to a question of what business am I in today? What business do I want to be in tomorrow? Am I in the hospitality business that's dependent on my face or people that work with me being in front of customers, or am I in the food production business in more of a takeout and delivery type of mode and operation? Who do I want to be? Where am I going? And defining that and then building off of that strength.
Yes. Yes. We love to look back and say, if I only did this. Well, start doing it. Start doing it. Take that first step. Gieto gave you 2 steps. I asked for 3. He gave me 2. He's a great negotiator. But you heard the steps. Take a look. You might be surprised, either pleasantly or shocked, to see what's been walking out your door without you knowing it. And, where have the profits gone? The profits have gone to negligence. And just remember that. If you're negligent, nobody else is going to help you. So we're going to be back next week. And I look forward to seeing you. You could always find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. But until then, until I get a chance to speak to you one more time, all I have to say is everybody stay positive, test negative, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one, everybody, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.